So the other day we brought you part 1 of our countdown of every Premier League club's most expensive signing in the January transfer window, with part 1 ending with Robbie Brady and Luka Milivojevic tied on £13 million. Well, today we're counting down the final 10 Premier League teams, so let's not waste any more time. In 10th place is Southampton, whose most expensive January signing is Manolo Gabbiadini from Napoli, who cost between £14 and £15 million. There are conflicting reports on the fee, but it's somewhere in between there. But regardless, Manolo Gabbiadini was a man possessed when he first arrived at St Mary's, scoring with absolute ease as soon as he landed on Premier League shores. The Italian scored 6 goals in his first 4 Southampton games, but since then hasn't been quite as prolific, showing why Napoli were maybe willing to let him go, with Charlie Austin back to being the mainstay and striker. In joint 8th place is Leicester City, whose most expensive January signing is Wilfred Ndidi for £15 million from Genk. Other than the Champions League adventure, last season was a rough one for the Foxes, still nursing their title-winning hangover, wandering around wondering where N'Golo Kante is. However, one shining light for Leicester was the arrival of Nigerian midfielder Wilfred Ndidi, who arrived highly rated from Genk, with various other top European teams tracking the youngster. A man with a great future in the game, Wilfred Ndidi was an expensive yet brilliant January signing by Leicester. Also in 8th place are Arsenal, whose most expensive January signing is Andrei Arshavin for £15 million back in 2009. Sure, Jose Antonio Reyes arrived in January and would eventually cost £17 million, but we're looking at initial fees, so the little Russian still remains Arsenal's most expensive winter signing, costing £15 million from Zenit during a blizzard, meaning it was easy for the winger to acclimatise. Despite the cold temperatures, Arshavin quickly set the Premier League alight, with his crowning moment being 4 goals at Anfield in a 4-4 draw. Sadly, Arshavin's form went downhill and he returned to Zenit in 2013, potential unfulfilled. In 7th place is Tottenham, whose most expensive January signing is Jermaine Defoe for £15.75 million in 2009. Another transfer from 2009, Defoe's deal was the biggest of that window, with Spurs also forking out for Robbie Keane that month, making January 2009 the month of the Spurs comeback. Defoe returned to White Hart Lane after an impressive year for Portsmouth and would refuse to slow down back at Spurs, with his first full season back at the club ending with him having scored 18 goals, his best ever tally in the Premier League. In 6th place is Stoke City, whose most expensive January rival is Janelli Mbula, who cost £18.3 million from Porto in 2016. The midfielder was highly rated during his days at Marseille and then Porto, and Sharp showed why, impressing for the Potters on arrival. However, the wheels quickly fell off and there were rumours he was up for sale over the summer, with manager Mark Hughes willing to take a loss on Mbula before sending him on loan to Toulouse. It's certainly surprising to see Stoke City so high on this list, but with the way Mbula turned out, Mark Hughes will probably wish they weren't. Not that he's watching. In 5th place is Everton, who splashed out £20 million on Morgan Schneiderlin. It's yet another defensive midfielder, so it's clear to see that the most wanted men in January are defensive midfielders and strikers. Schneiderlin was no longer wanted at Old Trafford after a disappointing season and a half with the club, so the Toffees took him off their hands in hope he could recapture his Southampton form. Despite donning the number 2 shirt, which still annoys me, Schneiderlin got straight back into the groove, performing well alongside Idrissa Gueye. However, this season things haven't quite been as rosy for old Morgan, whose attitude has been up for debate. In 4th place is Manchester City, whose record January signings are Edin Dzeko costing £27 million from Wolfsburg in January 2011, as well as Gabriel Jesus, who also cost £27 million. January is a month for Man City to splash out on a striker, paying mega money for the previously mentioned pair, as well as Wilfried Bony, who cost an initial £25 million. But back to the records, Edin Dzeko initially struggled in Manchester, but would go on to play an important role in both recent title wins for City, scoring a key goal in that dramatic day against QPR, before leaving in 2015 to join Roma, where he scored even more goals. As for Gabriel Jesus, he'll prove to be even more valuable than Dzeko was, already defying belief at the Etihad despite his youthful age and wonky eyebrows. In 3rd place is Liverpool, who paid a whopping £35 million for Andy Carroll in January 2011. 2 of Liverpool's greatest players over the past decade in Luis Suarez and Felipe Coutinho arrived in January, but it was Andy Carroll who cost the most money, showing off the inflated prices for English players. Carroll had been flying in the Premier League for Newcastle when Liverpool came calling, with a certain Spaniard on the brink of leaving Anfield. Carroll didn't look like a typical Liverpool player on the face of it, and that was proven right, with the Reds unable to play with the target man, and Carroll was out the door in August 2012. In second place is Manchester United, whose biggest January rival is Juan Mata from Chelsea for £37.1 million. The biggest arrival during David Moyes' very short tenure at Old Trafford, Juan Mata was the kind of marquee player that Moyes needed in the summer, not in January. The Spaniard was no longer wanted by Mourinho at Stamford Bridge, and with Manchester United not rivaling Chelsea in the league, Mata was sent on his merry way up north, where he still is, continuing to provide goals and assists aplenty, despite not being a guaranteed starter. And at number 1 it's Chelsea, who have spent the most money on one player in the January transfer window, with Fernando Torres costing £50 million in January 2011. The man who Andy Carroll was replacing, neither signing worked out for the best. Torres was no longer the pacey striker he once was, having lost a yard after a serious knee injury, much to the anger of Carlo Ancelotti, who had wanted a bit more from the forward for £50 million. However, Torres did play his part in delivering the Champions League trophy to Chelsea, so some fans will argue he's worth every last penny. So that's all 20 Premier League teams' most expensive January signing. Let us know in the comments which of these records you think will be broken and by who. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.